Deciding where to live in the Pokemon world is no easy task. With vibrant, bustling communities at your every turn, there's really no wrong decision.
But what if you were a worm? That's right, just a regular, run-of-the-mill worm. Where should you live in this world filled with fire-breathing, weapon-wielding creatures?
We've ranked every settlement from Gens 1 to 5 based on multiple criteria to determine the best towns to live in if you were a worm. First, what's the population? More people means more feet that could potentially step on you while you're wiggling in the grass.
Well, some people might be into that, actually, so that might be a pro.
And, well, you know what? We're not talking about people, Shannon. We're talking about worms.
Are there birds nearby? We counted the bird Pokemon in all adjacent routes to see how likely it is you'll get eaten.
And you may think that along these lines, the presence of worm-type Pokemon nearby would be a good indicator as well, right? Well, you're wrong.
The Pokedex is constantly describing guys like Whirlpool as getting preyed upon, and Whirlpool is a Pokemon that can use moves to defend itself. But what kind of moves can a worm do?
The worm? It's literally named after them.
Well, unless the birds are fans of the performing arts, you're just gonna dance right into their bellies.
This better not awaken anything in me.
How much dirt is there in the town? This is basically worm real estate. The more dirt, the more room you have for worm stuff.
Are there objects like rocks, signs, or debris in the town that worms would love to hang out underneath? This counts as recreation. The underside of rocks are like nightclubs for worms.
What's the plant situation like? Worms feed off plants, so towns with lots of trees and grass would be ideal.
And finally, what are some other notable features of the town? Is there a school where children may dig up worms for fun to make soups or potions? Are there abandoned buildings that make for a worm paradise?
These were the things we considered when we ranked the top 10 towns to live in if you were a worm. So, starting off with number 10, Little Root.
The starting town for everyone's adventure through Hoenn, Little Root has no special qualities, but it has no bad ones either. It's on the small side, but surrounded by trees and grass. And most importantly, it has no birds living nearby, and the smallest number of residents if you don't count Evergrande City.
Fitting that this starting town would also be the start of our list. Truthfully, the first town from every game would be a good place to be a worm, but Little Root is just a little better.
Number 9, Evergrande City, the most misleading location in Pokemon because it is neither grand nor a city.
But that makes it the perfect place for a worm. With a population of 0, you could live here in relative peace, since the only people around are a select few trainers passing through to the Pokemon League.
But besides that, there's not much else here. It's an average size with some nice plant life, but there are Wingull nearby and not many structures to hang out underneath. So this is more so a great place for antisocial worms.
Number 8, Sinnoh's own Floroma Town. It's almost completely covered in flowers, so there's plenty to eat when they die and return to the earth. These flowers may also provide cover to hide from nearby bird Pokemon.
But on the flip side, the flowers are a big attraction for the town, so you may get trampled by tourists.
Well, that's just an average day in New York, except without the flowers.
Number 7, Icarus, Icarus.
I think it's Icarus.
Number 7,
Number 7.
Okay, no, Google says the anime calls it Icy Russ. I don't like that, but I'm gonna say, okay. Number 7, this city in Unova. This place has tons of dirt and plant life with a relatively small population, but what sets it apart is its location. It has a wet climate, giving it a delightfully moist environment that worms love.
This is especially true for the southern portion of the town, where large puddles keep the surrounding dirt wet, while also keeping humans away. And, even better, there are windmills around that scare away local birds to keep the worms safe. Or like large scarecrows strapped to the blades.
The straw flying everywhere and impales the worms. They're like, this isn't safe. I think we need to take Icarus off the list.
I'm starting to rethink this one.
The only downside is that the climate may potentially get too wet, forcing the worms above ground so that they don't drown. Of course, this shouldn't be too much of an issue as long as they surface near the windmills.
Number 6, Hearthome City. Although it's one of the largest cities in Sinnoh, Hearthome is home to a hearty place called Amity Square, a park where trainers can walk around with their Pokemon partners.
You may be wondering, why is this a good thing? Well, think of all the yummy Pokemon droppings that happen during those walks. You think someone's going to carry around a tarp to pick up after their Copperajah?
Well, only small Pokemon are allowed in there, but you get the picture. With a park's worth of dirt to work with and dozens of structures to hide under, this is worm paradise, as long as you avoid the feet of parkgoers and beaks of wild birds.
So before revealing the top 5, let's give a quick shout out to some of the worst places to live if you were a worm.
Vermilion and Olivine City. These are fishing communities, and any worms that live here are in constant fear of being dug up by fishermen and used on hooks to catch fish. What a way to go.
Also, Cianwood and Dewford. I'm not an expert, but I don't think worms can live in sand.
Well, they can, just not for very long. Pacific Log Town. Do I even need to explain this one?
Those aren't logs, those are big worms.
No.
Castelia City.
Too many people on this earth.
And also Eterna City, solely because of the underground man.
This is a guy so obsessed with digging and being inside the dirt that the sign on his house literally reads, "The Underground Man."
For a worm, there's just no rest with a guy like that around. You could wake up in the middle of the night and he's just there, staring.
Sutopolis in the Hoenn region. Not only is this city comprised nearly entirely of rock, it's also located inside a crater in the middle of the ocean. How would a worm even get here?
Maybe a wingull flies overhead and accidentally drops it in?
Ugh, truly a fate worse than death.
What, living in a crater?
No, living in the same city as Wallace.
Anyway, let's get back to the top 10. Ringing in at number 5, Delicio Town. Although this town looks pretty run-of-the-mill, it has one huge advantage that earns it a spot on the top 5. The Pokemon Daycare.
This is like Amity Square, but better. A fenced-off area that Pokemon can roam, free to evacuate their bowels wherever and whenever they please, with very little human interference. Bon appetit, worms!
Just be mindful of what kinds of Pokemon are placed in the daycare.
Number 4, Azalea Town in Johto. Another decently big and planty community, with the added benefit of wood bundles that make great hangout spots. But the real beauty of this place is slightly off to the east, Slowpoke Well.
A cool, damp cave that offers protection from the local birds. You really couldn't ask for better.
Except you can. Number 3, Verdanturf in Hoenn. This town has a tunnel with all the same features as Slowpoke Well, with the added benefit of being easier to access because you don't have to dig down a couple dozen feet to get there.
There are also no birds nearby, and the town has a lower population of people, making it safer to come out to forage for food.
If you even have to, Rusturf Tunnel is home to Wishmer. Look at the size of that butthole. I'm sure the droppings just slide right on out.
Ugh, jeez. Slide out like worms.
Right into my mouth, just one fluid motion. Sorry, did I say my mouth? I meant the worm's mouth.
Yes, the worm's mouth. Nearing the end.
End, you say?
Stop. We have number 2, Kanto's very own Fuchsia
Shannon,
City.
nearing the end, we have number 2. You can't tell me that wasn't a great line.
I didn't try that. Not only does this place have tons of dirt and greenery compared to its small population, it has Pokemon enclosures on the north side of town that create tons of manure.
This also keeps humans away, and possibly even the local birds.
And now, for the number 1 Pokemon city to live in if you were a worm. Fortree City in Hoenn. Not only does this place have an enormous amount of land and plants, but the entire community lives in the trees, reducing the probability of getting stepped on to nearly 0.
I've also heard they don't have indoor plumbing, they just throw it over the sides.
Oh, perfect.
The trees and houses also give the worms tons of coverage against the only potential threat, the local Wingull population.
The only downside to living in Fortree is that the gym is flying type, so it's filled with birds.
But really, these are fancy gym birds. They probably get fed luxurious meals every day. They'd turn their beaks up at the thought of eating a dirty worm off the ground.
And there you have it. The top 10 livable Pokemon towns for worms has finally been revealed.
And to all the worms out there, what are you waiting for?
Disagree with any of the towns on this list? Let us know below in the comments.
Or leave a little poop for the worms to munch on.
Yes, leave a little poop emoji for the worms.
That's not what I said.